This is Grace Weiss going over my week 2 practice exam and case study questions. I didn't do as well as I wanted to do on this test, but it was a practice and I know what to improve on from there. So starting with my 5 questions that I did not get right, the first one was, the question was, what is a dependent variable in an experiment? I said answer C, which was manipulated, influential, and an experimental factor. But I know that that is incorrect now. The correct answer was a factor measured in the experiment, which does make sense thinking about it logically. The next question I got incorrect was which is true about qualitative research, and I said it statistically analyzes information, which I thought was right, but it was incorrect. The correct answer was it involves obtaining information using descriptive measures as interviewing, case studies, biographies, first-hand sources. I just think I needed to get a better definition on that question. The next question I got incorrect was during middle and late childhood, a child typically, the answer I said was develops an abstract and idealistic thoughts, just because I thought their brains were growing and they were having they were getting a lot of influence from other people. The correct answer was a child typically interacts more with the social world beyond their family, which I do agree with, and looking back, I should have picked that one. Now I know, though. Moving on to the 4th question I got incorrect was, according to Vygotsky's blank means changing the level of support. I said equilibration, which was not correct. I think I just didn't have a good definition of it. I was going between that and scaffolding was actually the correct answer. It means changing the level of support over the course of the session. The teacher gives adjustments of the amount of guidance that the kid needs throughout. Then moving on to my last question that I got incorrect, that was which of the following best describes sensory memory, and I unfortunately said it stores information primarily in terms of its underlying meaning to aid with recall. But after doing more research and looking into it, I know that sensory holds information from the world in its original sensory form for only an instant, not much longer than a brief time for a student to visualize auditory and the other sensations. After the practice exam, I do think that I need to study a little more and rewatch the videos to get the grade that I want. And looking at the practice questions I got wrong has helped me see where I'm maybe going wrong and need to look into more areas. I'm also just going off of my notes that I've taken for this class. Now, moving on to the second part of the question, which is the case study focus. Starting off with the first question, does the Punnett square activity promote successful integration into long-term memory and deep processing? Why or why not? I think yes, the Punnett square does promote successful long-term memory and deep processing because students are actively using information instead of just memorizing it. They must constantly apply what they're learning to solve problems and create their own examples for it. Information is more likely to turn into long-term memory when learners make connections and think about the meaning of what they're learning and can apply it to real-life situations. Although some students did not fully understand the concept, so by them not fully understanding it, they might not gain some of the background knowledge, being less knowledgeable in the entire concept itself. Moving on to question number 2, which is some of Ms. Overrocker's students prefer taking multiple choice tests. Explain how the use of rote memorization to study for a text affects learning and transfer. Well, rote memorization does help by repeating it over and over because then it gets stored into your memory so you remember. This can work on facts, multiple choice, longer exams. Although research has shown that a lot of rehearsal can turn into shallow processing. Students may remember the new information, but may have a hard time applying it to situations. Understanding concepts deeply helps better learning and transfer. Now moving on to question 3. Miss Overacker seems frustrated by her students' inability to complete the class activities. Using what you learned about how we can facilitate transfer and deep processing, provide Miss Overacker with suggestions for improving her activities. First, I would start with teaching them the basic concepts as well as the definitions so they can have a good ground base on what to work with. Then after that, you could have them complete more difficult tasks on their own and adjust the teaching or help that you're giving them. Also, more guided practice and examples could help. For example, having them make their own Punnett squares, or maybe having them make their own Punnett squares and then switching and explaining it to one of their classmates or peers. To improve transfer, she could connect the genetics to real life situations that they are dealing with now, or to make it personal to the kids. That connection will help the learning bridge. These strategies would help students process things more deeply and use it in new situations that they can apply to the real world. Finally, moving on to question 4, what factors may have led students to not using their metacognitive skills? Well, we know that metacognition means thinking about and monitoring your own learning. Some students did not use these skills because they were not aware of what they did and did not understand. For example, Garrett did not realize that missing notes would make the activity a lot more difficult, while other students relied on memorization and rehearsal of checking whether they truly understood the material. Some freshmen may also have less experience in using metacognitive strategies because they're less used to it, they don't have the practice, such as asking questions, reviewing confusing concepts, adjusting their study behaviors and habits, because they were not actively monitoring their learning. They struggled when they applied their knowledge in new ways. Overall, this case study shows that students learn best when they move beyond memorization and actively learn and engage with the material to create the learning patterns in their brain for long-term memory. While the Punnett Square actively encouraged deeper thinking and application, some students did struggle because they lacked the key background, fundamentals, and education and did not monitor their own understanding of it. By providing more support, guided practice, and opportunities to connect concepts to real-life situations, Ms. Overacker can help students strengthen their understanding, improve transfer of learning, and develop better metacognitive skills. Thank you.